Right now, as we speak, something revealing is happening in global politics. Not policy, not diplomacy, performance. Because what happens when politicians stop governing and start auditioning? There is a difference, a massive difference between leadership and recursion. And today, we start rehearsing. Let me ask you something. When you watch American politicians pick overseas, do you see representatives of national strength or candidates polishing resumes? Because those are not the same thing. And the gap between them, that is where reality snakes in. Today's episode is about what this unfolded and the Munich Security Conference, where prominent Democrats began sounding far less like lawmakers and far more like earning presidential contenders. Alexandria, Ocasio-Cortez, Gavin, Newsom, global states, election cycle energy, and a performance that revealed more than it intended to. That is the work of accountability desk, because mainstream coverage lost spectacles but avoids implications. So here's the core question. Were we watching diplomacy today or the opening act of the 2028 campaign? Let's break this.
Switching gears to this, the Democrats are bringing their TDS global. Several potential 2028 contenders playing pretend president at the Munich Security Conference, with all eyes on AOC and your boy Gavin Newsom.
Donald Trump is temporary. He'll be gone in 3 years.
There is something fascinating about early campaign behavior. It does not announce itself. It lags, tone shifts, language changes, audience targeting expands. Suddenly, we just stop sounding like arguments and start sounding like positioning statements. And that is exactly what happened. AOC taps onto an international platform and delivers a sweeping warning about authoritarianism, global instability, and America's role in the one. Sounds serious until you actually listen.
They are looking to withdraw the United States from the entire world so that we can turn into an age of authoritarians that can carve out the world where Donald Trump can command the Western Hemisphere and Latin America as his personal sandbox.
Not as the structure, weight, thread, abstract villains, apocalyptic framing, not concrete mechanisms, not defined policy pathway, just atmosphere. It is the political equivalent of dramatic music without amenity. Because when specifics are missing, emotion fills the vacuum. And emotion is campaign fuel, not governing show. Meanwhile, back home, reality it chooses to cooperate with narrative building, inflation cooling, markets climbing, economic indicators stabilizing, which creates a problem because doom messaging only birth when people actually feel doom.
We just had fantastic reports on inflation, way down. Costs of products, way down. We inherited a mess, total mess, and now it's really coming along. We have the greatest numbers that we've ever had. We're hitting all-time high stock numbers. We're hitting all-time high S&P and Dow numbers. You saw that a few days ago, at the end of the first year.
Now think about the contrast this creates. On one side, global alarming system collapse rhetoric, civilization and exiting. On the other, economic confidence messaging, growth framing, momentum narrative, two competing emotional universes. On it, one can dominate water psychology. And Democrats know this, which explains why the language is escalating so early. Then enter Gavin Newsom, and this is where things get really interesting. Because Newsom's message was not aggressive, it was patient.
President Trump will be known as a great economic president. I agree with you. This is a year, it's going to be an economic boom. But he is going to be known as one of the greatest foreign policy presidents of our time. None of them have the, quote, cojones, I'll use it in Spanish, that President Trump have.
So, Greg, now that, let's say, and if President Trump doesn't have a third term, the reality is that they're not running against him, they're running against his legacy and against his successor. So what does...
With him, temporary, 3 years. This is not foreign policy language. This is election cycle language. This is not addressing adversaries. This is addressing future voters. Because embedded inside that message is a promise. Just endure this phase. We will restore the old order. And that right there is this strategic reveal. Because what is the old order? And more importantly, why are they already campaigning on restoring it? Because when a politician says this is temporary, they're not describing reality. They're managing emotion. They're calming their coalition. They're signing reassurance. They are saying, do not panic. The strip will resume its normal programming. But here is the uncomfortable problem with that message. What if voters did not say disruption as a bug, but as the entire point? Because elections are not weather event. They're choices, deliberate choices. And Newsom's framing quietly implies something Democrats rarely say out loud. That America first was an interruption, a deviation, a phase to be waited out. Now pause for a second. Think about how that linked with ordinary voters, not political insider, not constant audiences, actual citizens. If a candidate tells you your political preference are just the time-trading more function, how exactly is that supposed to persuade you? Because voters do not like big tone their decisions as illegitimate accidents, especially when that message is delivered on foreign soil. There is a deeper subtext running underneath all of this. It is not about AOC. It is not about Newsom. It is about worldview. One worldview says national sovereignty as stabilizing, and another sees it as destabilizing. Munich did not just showcase speeches, it showcased that divide. Because listen to the emotional architecture. Redistribution is stability. Market dynamics are danger.
Raise taxes on the wealthy. We just have to bust up the monopolies and redistribute the wealth. A lot of people aren't going to go for that, but at least that's a coherent message. Gavin came in and just gave the Stump speech on climate that he's given for decades. And he said the exact opposite of what AOC said. He said what Greg said, is that
higher taxes, monopoly busting, wealth redistribution, presented not as policy preference, but as planetary survival mechanism. This is not economic debate language. This is existential framing, and existential framing is campaign rhetoric at its purest form. Meanwhile, Newsom's message, calm down, we will restore normalcy, globalist returns, climate politics resume. Two rhetorical styles, same strategic objective. They assure the coalition the pendulum will swing back. But here is where the performance cracked. Global audiences are not American voters, and American voters are not Munich delegates. What sounds persuasive inside elite policy circles often sounds violently disconnected back home. Because voters measure politics through lived experiences, inflation pressures, energy prices, crime concerns, water stability, economic mobility, kitchen table realities. Now, here is the strategic tension. How do you run a restoration campaign if voters increasingly sees the past as the problem? Because return to the normal only works if normal is remembered fondly. This brings us to the most revealing part of this episode. Not what they attacked, but what they avoided. Pacific counter-argument can create policy contrast, measurable comparison. Instead, we get more toward atmosphere, classic positioning behavior, and that leads to the next critical question. If this is already the messaging strategy, what does the actual battlefield look like? Because election cycles are not won on conference stages, they're won on perception battles, narrative dominance, emotional alignment, credibility contest. Munich offered a preview, not detailed contrast, but framing wars on one side, stability, economic momentum, strength projection, on the other, urgency, existential threat. Restoration promises this is not just policy disagreement, this is psychological architecture, because modern campaigns are less about persuasion, they're more about emotional gravity. Which worldview feels safer? Which future feels predictable? Which leadership feels anchored? Now consider the risk of existential rhetoric. When everything becomes existential, nothing feels solvable. Where inflation works like economic inflation. Overuse kills impact. Meanwhile, confidence messaging scales differently. because optimism cares, fear saturates. Now, here is the deeper miscalculation. They're not speaking to ideological allies, not persuadable voters. And persuadable voters? A simple question. Am I safer? I mean better off? Does this feel competent with being as to the temporalist framing? If your promise is, we will reverse this, you're conceding something significant actually changed. You're admitting disruption had impact. Now zoom out. What did Munich really expose? Not incompetence, not failure, alignment between messaging and comfort zone. And this is the core takeaway. Campaigns built on activist vocabulary often collide with voter vocabulary. Systems versus new experience. When it was not diplomacy theater, it was campaign rehearsal. And rehearsals reveal strategic long before ballots do. Because when politicians start auditioning early, they start revealing priorities early. And voters are very good at detecting authenticity gaps. If they want clarity without institutional filters, if you want decoding without sugarcoating, subscribe. Because accountability desk does not just headline, it dissects implication. And trust me, the election cycle has only just begun.